Watch this.
The search for Boise's next police chief continues. But what does that search entail? Mayor McLean shares her thoughts on what she's looking for and the future of the police department. The wheels on the Meals on Wheels program are about to come off for a lot of places they serve. Increased demand and dwindling funds is forcing a refocus. We check in with how they're handling it in Caldwell. This time of year, Idaho's true colors come out. They're real and they are spectacular, especially in one of Boise's ribbon of jewels. We take you to Kathryn Albertson Park. Boise's police department has been under an interim chief for a little more than 5 weeks now. The former Chief Ryan Lee was asked to resign by Mayor McLean about 24 hours after a 7 Investigates report detailed a number of complaints filed by officers about the chief. The 6-figure severance aside, what kind of a mark has been left on the city and the mayor, for that matter, is a lot of the questions. Joe Paris sat down with Boise Mayor Lauren McLean this afternoon to find out what she is looking for in the new chief. And their conversation, it started with the topic of morale at BPD.
I believe in all the conversations that we've had, my team has had with the department, that there's a lot we need to do to support our officers, because policing right now is difficult. Our city's growing, there are so many expectations on our officers. So as the leader of the city, as we think about what's next with the search, one of the key tenets of the search is going to be to ensure we have a leader that can support our officers and really believes in the way that we do policing here, and that's policing the Boise way.
We've heard from officers, and we saw on television, there was clearly some issues inside Boise Police. There's people unhappy. Do you think it's in a better spot today than it was 6 weeks ago?
I really appreciate that Interim Chief Ron Weiniger has agreed to serve alongside and in partnership with Deputy Chief Brooks to help us address the needs of the department so we can really support our officers. And tough times, challenges create opportunities. So now we have the opportunity to truly understand what our officers need to continue to do the great job that they've always done, how we invest in and support a department as our city grows, and then how we find the right leader that can both work with the department to support them, that believes in policing the Boise way as we do it, that can be a partner to council to ensure that we continue to increase investment in our police department as our city grows.
As you jump into the search here, what are you looking for as in mayor, and what do you think the city needs as a police chief? What type of person, what type of leader are you looking for?
I am looking for a leader, and I should say I'm looking for a leader in partnership with both the city council and the community and the department. We will all work together to find the next leader for the Boise Police Department that understands how important policing the Boise way is. And policing the Boise way is grounded in what we've always done and which has always kept our community safe. It's both ensuring that officers have time to forge deep connections with our residents and holding people accountable when they commit crimes. And so in order to meet the demands of the moment as our city grows, to increase investment in policing as I've done for the last 3 years, we're going to need a leader that's committed to the connections that we cherish here in our community, that's committed to the connections that our officers cherish with our community, and that has the skills to help us continue to increase our investments in officers, in training, in the tools and support this department needs to be successful.
It's always natural for these types of conversations when you're searching for a city leader to become, is it an insider or an outsider? And we've heard a lot of opinions from a lot of people on this. Do you as mayor have an opinion on if it's an insider or outsider, or do you not care?
I am seeking the best leader for this department and for our community. And I believe at the end of the day, that is what everyone is searching for. And yes, there's a lot of opinions on that. But I believe that if we do the search right, if we engage our officers and include what it is they need in a leader, we engage the public and have a conversation about the safety of our community, the priority that we have to maintain the safety of our community, and how that means that we have to invest with a commitment and an understanding of the importance of connection. That leader will rise through this process. Internal, external, what's most important is that this person leads our department and community in policing the Boise way.
As I know you're well aware, there was a lot of opinions in the community about what happened at Boise Police, and those are kind of behind us now. But from a pure, I guess, response point, what was your impressions of how much the city of Boise cared and how much feedback you did get about that? Because it wasn't like this flew under the radar. There's a lot of people that seem to care.
Public safety is the highest priority for all of us. And so the support that we provide our officers, the leadership of a department matters. I'd want that to matter, right? Like I expect it to matter, I'd want it to matter for the community. And we share the value of public safety, the value of supporting our officers, the value of knowing our officers, seeing them in community. And so as we look ahead to the next leader of this department, that value that Boiseans place on public safety, the trust Boiseans have in our police department is of utmost importance. As our city grows, we've got to make sure that we maintain that by finding the right leader, supporting our officers who protect and serve on a daily basis, and investing in them in the future.
All right, so how will this whole process go of finding a new chief of police? Well, the city of Boise actually has hired a recruiting firm that's going to help them find a new permanent chief, and they're going to work alongside members of the Boise City Council, members of the community like you at home, the police union, as well as city leaders. And Brian, they're expecting that process to take up to a year. So it's going to be some time.
Okay, but we've just, I want to say relatively, just gone through this. I mean, Chief Lee was only hired in July of 2020. Prior to that, they looked for him. How is it different this time around?
So one thing that I think a lot of us might have forgotten in between now and the pandemic, it was actually Mayor Beater's staff that started the search for what ended up being Chief Lee. So when the mayor was elected, she came in and the process has basically already been started. So in terms of what makes this different, it's her administration now that gets to start the process from the beginning and see it all the way through. When Chief Bones left, that was back in 19, it was a much different world and it was a much different situation than what you would see here in 2022. So in terms of the differences, it'll be a much different group of people tackling this issue, but it's also a much different world than the situation in 2019 when you're looking to replace Chief Bones. So we'll see what happens with this recruiting firm. I'm under the impression this is going to take some time because they want to make sure they don't just have a chief of police, they want to have the right one.
As you said, a permanent one. All right, thank you very much, Joe. All right, if you had to take a guess at which candidate would be accused of breaking the rules this campaign season, who would that be? Who seems to be, I don't know, who has to have an aversion to rules he doesn't respect? Well, last week we took a look at some signs that started popping up around town. The black on white with a QR code with the block lettering that says don't vote. Yeah, those signs right there. As we discovered last week, it takes you to the Ammon Bundy for Governor campaign website, but not before claiming if you are an uninformed voter, you are the most dangerous person in a democracy. Not a misinformed voter, not an insurrectionist who tries to overthrow a democracy. Anyway, there was some question as to, when we did the story, as to who was behind the signs, the Bundy campaign or an outsider. As you just got a little sneak peek there, we kind of spilled the beans. Which is why, thanks to the Idaho Capital Sun, we learned yesterday the Secretary of State's office is looking into it as a possible campaign violation, since, according to Idaho law, campaign communications have to clearly indicate who communicated them. The paid for by and the I'm so-and-so and I approve this message, those have to be involved. Apparently, we now know who put up these signs. After numerous attempts to contact the Bundy campaign to ask, since it was not clearly indicated on the sign, along with seeing a few more signs showing up around the Treasure Valley, well, we noticed some of these started showing up with an aftermarket marking, a little sticker stuck to the lower left-hand corner. There it is, that says, paid for by Ammon Bundy for Governor. Granted, not all of these signs have this sticker, by the way, and if the law says such responsibility must be clearly indicated, that little itty-bitty sticker in the lower left-hand corner, I'm not sure if that clearly indicated fits the bill, which is, again, why the Secretary of State's office is taking a closer look at this as a campaign finance violation, a charge that carries with it a fine of $250. As of today, the Deputy Secretary of State tells us they have also not heard back from the Bundy folks about this, and we reached out again today. However, this fine will likely be levied as early as tomorrow. And I know what you're probably thinking, $250 fine for someone who doesn't even bother to show up to court when called? Yeah, I know. Not a bad price to pay for the attention he's just received in 2 stories on the 208 either. But you asked, and we answered, and now you know more. All right, if you think it's tough for school districts to recruit and retain teachers in Idaho's big cities, think about what that might be like for small towns. Lower pay, limited housing options, fewer resources. It's a situation the legislature addressed last session, and to do that, they made it possible for teachers who work in rural and underserved, that is, areas of the state to apply for help to pay for their student loans. Yes, you heard that correctly. The state of Idaho is offering to pay off student loans for teachers and other eligible educational expenses. To qualify for these funds, though, you must be a full-time certified teacher in a qualified Idaho school district or a public charter school, meaning you must have signed a contract and be working for said school that is considered rural or low income by Idaho standards. You also have to have a student loan balance of more than $1,000, and it can't be in default. Plus, you have to plan to stay at the same school for a period of time. Well, that period of time was laid out by the legislators like this: $1,500 for the first year, $2,500 for the second year, $3,500 for the third year, $4,500 for the fourth year, as you can see it go on there. But that makes it a max, though, of $12,000 there. So that's kind of the time frame that you were looking at. That website for you to apply went live yesterday, and the State Board of Education is accepting applications now until December 9th for the first round of incentive payments. You know, the pandemic hit a lot of people hard, perhaps none harder than our senior citizens, those more than 60 years old. Pre-COVID, that meant nearly 400,000 Idahoans, and of those, nearly 90,000 of them live alone, all by themselves. About half of those, well, they struggle to pay for basic living expenses. Meals on Wheels is a national nonprofit which provides meals to seniors who are otherwise stuck in their homes and can't get out to get food for themselves. Well, the demand for that service has increased, and at one point during the COVID pandemic, it more than doubled, you know, with social distancing and all. And that, of course, led to drawbacks. The agency that distributes the federal funds to local programs, they announced Southwest Idaho can no longer afford to pay for weekend meals, and it's going to stay that way for a while. Here's Andrew Barline.
Help from a hospital extends out the door from the West Valley Medical Center,
26.
where volunteers pack up the coolers with the meals they bought.
They haven't raised prices for our meals in a number of years, even though I know their cost for food has gotten to be much higher.
And they hit the road in the wheels they brought. This delivery comes daily to Pat Peterson.
This is a godsend. It really is.
She's 82 now and has relied on Meals on Wheels for the better part of a decade.
I don't drive anymore. I have this side of my body doesn't like to cooperate a lot, and I don't trust myself going from the gas pedal to the brake. So it's been difficult.
Pat's homebound, so she relies on Meals on Wheels to navigate the gas pedal for her 7 days a week.
I count on it. That's my main meal.
For 120 others in Caldwell, it's their main meal too.
There are folks that have been on my route for longer than I've been doing this, and I've been doing it for 13 years. And so we really do develop relationships with them.
Julie Warwick is the program coordinator. For the people on her route, she feels responsible, which makes the latest news hard to swallow because the organization is hitting the brakes.
They told us around the 1st of September or so that they were going to have to revamp the program and would no longer be providing funding for weekend meals for people.
Area 3 Senior Service Agency allocates funding for Meals on Wheels programs in Southwest Idaho. As demand increases, budget decisions have to be made.
I feel terrible. I feel terrible that that we know there are seniors out there that are struggling, and we're making them fend for themselves or have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on Saturday and Sunday. That's not right. They need a hot and nutritious meal.
So Julie promised just that. She stepped back on the gas pedal.
I knew that would be a real problem for a lot of our folks.
Caldwell Meals on Wheels has local funds they control. Warwick is using that rainy day fund to bridge the gap until the next fiscal year on July 1st. But covering weekends for the next 7 months won't be cheap.
That's going to cost us to do that $22,000. It's not sustainable for us to go past there, on July 1, if they don't go back to funding for 7 days a week. My folks are going to be down to 5 days a week as well.
But for Pat, she says there's no other way. She needs those weekend meals. She needs someone stepping on the gas.
I'd be up a creek. I really would.
The Area 3 Senior Services Agency gets their funding from the federal government, and that funding has not been cut or reduced. It's just as demand rises, they can't continue to afford all the services they did before for an increasing number of people. If Caldwell didn't dip into their savings, Warwick estimates roughly 80 people would not be fed on weekends, which is a big deal for a lot of these people, Brian, where you can't drive.
No.
Some of them are disabled and on Medicaid, and in that sense, I guess that's a good thing because Medicaid would pay for it. So it doesn't impact everybody who's on 7 days a week, but a lot of them.
Okay, so you talked to Caldwell, and they have that rainy day fund, which is great, but obviously it's not going to last forever. What about the other factions of Southwestern Idaho? What do they do for these weekends?
Yeah, the Boise metro area has a Meals on Wheels program as well. We tried to get in contact with them. We couldn't get any answers today, but we know they are much bigger than Caldwell, and from our conversation with Julie Warwick, it seems that a lot of their people who were on 7 days are reduced to 5 as well.
Okay, and I know we're going to get this request, like what can people do who see this story and want to help out? Is there a way that, I don't know, to make up that difference, whether by bodies or money?
Yeah, they do accept donations. All the people going around and doing this are volunteers as well. Julie Warwick, who we spoke with, she's the only person who's employed. She's the program coordinator. Everybody else has volunteered, and there are like 3 or 4 vans and trucks out there loading it up themselves and driving in their own vehicles. So there's a lot of volunteer effort in this.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Most photogenic. No, we're not talking about high school senior accolades, but one of Boise's most picturesque parks, which, believe it or not, was nothing more than a pasture for its namesake's horses. Speaking of scenic, it's time for you to share your true colors. We want to hear your comments, your questions, and your concerns, as long as they're clean, clever, and concise. Text them to the number on your screen, 208-321-5614. And don't forget to include your name and the hashtag #the208. Because, well, we want to know who gets the credit when we share them at the end of the show. Okay, so just like the summer sticking around longer than it probably should have, with fall taking its time to get here, the fall foliage is also stuck around a bit longer this season, or at least it seems that way. And judging from the wind outside today, well, we've only got a few days left to enjoy the colors, as you can see here, that come with this season. Some of the best places to do that, to see these colors, are right here in downtown Boise, along Boise's Ribbon of Jewels Park system. They're the public parks named after prominent women who helped shape the history of Boise as we know it today. There is one park, though, in particular that is especially beautiful this time of year, and the name might sound pretty familiar to a lot of Boiseans. This isn't a park for a playground.
I come out here because I love to see the colors.
There isn't a slide or a seesaw to be seen.
There's just so much wildlife here.
But what you do see
What do you see?
at this park
Just about everything.
is worth more than just a glimpse.
Raccoons, owls, migrating birds.
And the turtles, and the fish, and the ducks.
Here, it's like still life come to life. A true reflection of a watercolor painting.
And it's never the same, and it's just beautiful.
An oasis for wildlife and lives less wild.
Can get away from the city in a little tiny spot.
It truly is a park that allows you to get away from the hustle and bustle of what's going on in our community, but yet you're only literally 5 blocks from the heart of downtown.
Kathryn Albertson Park is 7th in the string of Boise's Ribbon of Jewels parks. While it was named for her by her husband Joe, the famous grocer, Kathryn's story stands by itself.
Kathryn was born in Boise, Idaho in the North End in 1908. She was the first graduating class of Boise High.
Her great-granddaughter says Kathryn met Joe at the College of Idaho.
The story is they were chemistry partners, and that Grandpa spilled some chemistry acid on Grandma's pantyhose. It almost caught fire, and then he fell in love with her on the spot.
That's when the real chemistry began.
They were married on New Year's Day, and they were married for over 60 years.
Those early years saw them move back to Boise, where Joe started his grocery store in 1939 with Kathryn's help.
You know, my grandfather got a loan from my grandmother's aunt of her life savings to start the store. So they were true partners, they were in it together, and grocery business is a tough business. And so I think they were just the epitome of a really loving, but hardworking couple. You know, they started with nothing. They opened a grocery store during the Depression, and they created an amazing legacy.
Finding success, the Albertsons had a legacy of giving back. But before that, Joe wanted to give something to Kathryn. So he bought 41 acres of land next door. And for decades, it held nothing but horses.
Just 30 years ago, it was really a dry and dusty pasture.
That changed in October of 1989, when that pasture, donated to the city, was dedicated in honor of Kathryn.
His vision was to create a natural sanctuary in the heart of downtown.
And they were really inspired by this idea of a nature park that you could just walk through, and it would be a really robust habitat for birds and wildlife. This really wasn't a popular idea. Most of our parks had soccer fields and playground equipment, and those are fantastic, but this is such a unique experience to have right in the heart of downtown.
And in the heart of the park, remnants of what Joe and Kathryn started together.
One of the roof of one of the structures is actually made from tile from the very first Albertson stores. It's a red tile that was on the original store.
Just one of the many colors and animals that catch the eye of local shutterbugs.
And it arguably is one of the most photogenic parks in the state of Idaho.
And you can tell the good photographers because they have nice, expensive equipment.
But there's no price you can put on this picturesque park.
Yeah, I just love it.
All right, a lot of people wondering about the Meals on Wheels program in Southern Idaho. Maybe $2 million surplus, billion-dollar surplus could help out with that a little bit. But let's get to your last comment here. A state paying off student loans, no different than the Army National Guard paying off student loans for recruits. I don't agree with paying off student loans for everybody but public servants. I do, says Ed. Would teachers fall under public servants? That's probably the part I'm confused about. I'm not exactly sure. It's a good question. All right, thank you very much, Edie, for that text. And we'll see you back here tomorrow for more of yours, hopefully.